Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has told the Zondo Commission that he is confident the country will never see state capture again. Meanwhile, political analyst Omry Makgoale says the capture of the ANC has been done to loot the state and government resources. Makgoale joins me now, together with legal analyst Benedict Phiri, for more on the president's testimony. Gentlemen, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Date Opa, let me start with you. You have spoken and sort of analyzed, the outcome of the president's statement, testimony that we saw over 2 days. Speaking about the role of the ANC, give us your take on what you made of what the president had to say, as you also correlated with the ANC's work.
Sorry, yes. I missed, I think, look, what the president is saying is explaining that he thinks that the ANC will now be in a position to work towards preventing state capture. At the moment, according to my analysis, we're not yet there. The problems on how the ANC was captured and how the state was captured, are in sequence. First, they captured the ANC. Then after capturing the ANC, then they capture the state using the ANC. So we have two electoral laws. A confluence of these two electoral laws has led us to this state capture at the moment. What is happening is the branch delegate method of electing leaders inside the ANC and the parliamentary method of appointing members of parliament. Those two laws, the confluence of those two laws, bring us to this state capture. So unless those two laws are addressed, we cannot prevent state capture in future. It will still happen.
Benedict, Mr. Makgoale speaks here of the confluence of two laws, the electoral law also playing a significant role in what we saw. I mean, trillions worth of state capture looting. What do you think are some of those changes that need to be made?
Yeah, thank you, Mpho. So, when I look back at President Ramaphosa's testimony over the past 2 days, I think what is clear for me, which is really glaring, and Advocate Pretorius and Judge Zondo probed, is the extent of this cadre deployment on the weakening of governance in these institutions that were captured. President Ramaphosa yesterday saying to Judge Zondo not to make an adverse finding against this cadre deployment policy, because I think it had become exceptionally clear that that is the problem, because these cadres are deployed into these institutions and are beholden to the party and forgetting what is required from a legal governance perspective. So I expect Judge Zondo to address at least an aspect around cadre deployment and its effects on governance in state institutions, and also make recommendations around how we tighten, the leaders in those institutions, how they conduct themselves up to international and constitutional legal standards. So that's really what I'm expecting to flow out, at least from the president's testimony over the last 2 days.
Coming back to you, Mr. Makgoale, we speak about cadre deployment, and we know that on day one of the 2-day testimony, a lot of emphasis was placed on the president's role as ANC chair of the deployment committee, and some tough questions were asked there about the power and the leverage of that committee and the influential status of that committee, especially when it comes to the judicial system.
Yes, I think, let me say, in principle, there's nothing wrong with cadre deployment. It's done all over the world. The problem is, in our case, the ANC is captured. Now, when the ANC is captured, cadre deployment is no longer cadre in terms of how we understand the cadre in the ANC, but it's now those who captured the ANC decide who they want to deploy in various places to do whatever they want them to do, their assignments, because of a capture narrative. Now, I wish to emphasize, cadre deployment in principle, there's nothing wrong with it. It's done all over the world. The problem is, in our case, the ANC is captured, and because the ANC is captured, cadre deployment then was done by the Guptas or the Watsons and so on, via their proxies in the NEC, via their proxies in the cabinet, and that's how they undermine the entire system. But the system in itself, there's nothing wrong with it. But of course, if you've got a crook who must now deploy cadres, he's going to deploy crooks because he's a crook. So, and this is what I want to try and clarify, that it is not the cadre deployment problem, but it's who does it and for what purpose.
And Benedict, what do you imagine to be the implications of what we heard from the explosive testimony from President Cyril Ramaphosa, as of course we also heard about his role, his silence and his strategy when it comes to dealing with state capture during his role as deputy president?
Yeah, I think there's a number of implications. For one, I think the governing party and its leaders cannot continue burying their head in the sand and turning a blind eye to these acts when they occur. I don't think it's enough for the president of the ruling party to say that, he was in there trying to turn the Titanic around very slowly within there, together with others, because what we're realizing, as the president himself actually said, and I think Advocate Pretorius pushed him on this, is that what the governing party is ensconced in within a governing framework is really politics and not necessarily the best interests of South Africans. And I expect that Judge Zondo will try somewhat to remove what comes around by factionalism and playing politics, which really paralyzes these institutions. He'll try to make some recommendations around how to distance those sort of elements from creeping into these institutions. So I'm expecting to see that coming into Judge Zondo's report, especially, when we heard of the SSA and how what had happened there over the past years was not even enough to deal, or at least led us to the situation with our July riots. It's very clear how the culture of the ANC and the way that it works translates to government, and how it's very necessary to separate those aspects, or at least find mechanisms to make a better separation.
It's interesting, Mr. Makgoale, as Benedict speaks about the SSA. Some analysts have argued that Ramaphosa's silences on the SSA abuses and state capture may perhaps be even more important than what we heard throughout the two-day testimony.
Yes, it's important. It's important that he should have, said more about what state security agents, because that is basically the nerve center of how the government or the state and the ANC works. It's inside state security agents. So it's very important. But I want to say that our problems here are problems coming from the parliamentary electoral laws. In South Africa, we don't elect our members of parliament directly. They are appointed by the party. And this is why what happens inside the party then affects the state. It's because of the parliamentary electoral laws. So once we change these parliamentary electoral laws, it will no longer be possible to do state capture in the manner at which it is done now. But we have to change the parliamentary electoral laws. And we hope that, after a new nation, a movement court application, what Judge Madlanga has said, we hope that that will be implemented and we can elect our members of parliament directly, because that is where the capture takes place. ANC capturing parliament because they give they write the list and the citizens are nowhere to be seen. The ANC members are also nowhere to be seen, because who elects the leaders in the ANC is the branch delegate, which is about 2% of ANC members. So most of the ANC members are watching a movie like you people as you are watching, because they don't have control over that. So we need to change the electoral laws inside the ANC to one member, one vote, and in the parliamentary law to allow members of parliament to be directly elected by the citizens, not now, with this party list stuff. And that's where the capture takes place. I hope Judge Zondo will be in a position to see that. That is because of the electoral laws that we have been captured.
And Benedict, very closely, quickly in closing here, it's one thing to speak of the incremental steps that need to take place, like changing the parliamentary electoral laws. But what will it take then for politicians, banks, lawyers, accountants, and so forth to, in true essence, account for the 1.5 trillion rands worth of state capture?
That's quite a difficult question, Mpho, because, we also heard yesterday around President Ramaphosa talking about private sector corruption and also being accountable. I think, we have some good examples of corporate citizens who have been implicated in this corruption and who've paid back some monies and atoned. I certainly think there's not enough of that. And I think, it will be good for Judge Zondo to look at whistleblower laws, look at tightening up, some of the the laws that are applied to anti-corruption, and making those, equally as having more teeth, I suppose, from a private sector perspective. Lawyers, already we have an obligation to flag suspicious activity to, for instance, a financial intelligence center. But for whatever reason, in this instance, that kind of activity wasn't seen. So I think those kind of laws will also probably need to be tightened up to create greater obligations to stop this going forward.
Thank you so much for your time. Let me thank you, gentlemen, there, political analyst Omry Makgoale, as well as legal analyst Benedict Phiri, weighing in and giving some perspective following 2 days of heated testimony by President Cyril Ramaphosa at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry.